You were told that growing older meant growing up, that once you hit a certain age, signed a lease, paid your taxes, maybe fell in love, or had a kid that you had become a man. You believed responsibility would shape you, that pressure would harden you, that failure would somehow wake you up. But the truth, age doesn't make you a man. Pain doesn't guarantee growth. Responsibility without emotional control just makes you a fragile leader, one tantrum away from collapse. Somewhere along the way between the first time you slammed a door in anger and the last time you sabotaged something good because you couldn't wait, you stopped evolving. You just adapted. You learned how to perform adulthood, not live it. You mimicked the language, copied the posture, wore the mask, but inside the same scared, impulsive boy never left. And he still runs the show. That boy shows up in how you handle rejection, in how you rage when things don't go your way, in how you crave applause not for growth, but just to feel alive. And here's the brutal part. The world doesn't care that you feel misunderstood. It only responds to one thing: power. And power doesn't come from being loud, emotional, or real. It comes from restraint, from mastering the storm inside before trying to navigate the world outside. So let me ask again, not to insult you, but to awaken you. Are you really leading your life, or is the child inside you still deciding how you react, how you love, how you fall, and how you lose? You can wear a tailored suit, drive a $100,000 car, and speak with the confidence of a man who knows what he's doing. But if you can't control your emotions, none of it matters. You are still a child. And no, not the romanticized inner child that self-help books tell you to embrace. I'm talking about the wounded, impulsive, emotionally fragile boy that lives behind your face, the one you've been hiding behind success, sarcasm, and surface-level confidence. It's easy to believe that with age comes maturity, that time by itself evolves us. But time doesn't mature you, it only reveals you. And if you've spent your years reacting instead of reflecting, escaping instead of enduring, breaking instead of building, then the truth is the boy inside you never grew up. He just learned how to pretend. And that pretense is your greatest enemy, because a man who hasn't mastered his emotions cannot lead, not in business, not in love, not even in his own inner world. Emotional immaturity shows itself in subtle but deadly ways: that sharp tone you use when you're criticized, that need to always be right, that fear of silence because it reminds you you're not okay. And worst of all, that habit of blaming the world every time something falls apart. You may think you're strong because you say it like it is, because you don't take shit from anyone. But rage is not strength. Spite is not confidence. Reactivity is not power. They're all symptoms of a deeper weakness, the inability to regulate your own storm. And that inability is the reason you keep sabotaging your relationships, failing your own standards, and staying stuck in cycles of self-destruction. You're not cursed, you're just undisciplined. You're not broken, you're untrained. And unless you begin to govern yourself not with shame, but with clarity and command, that child will continue to make decisions for you. He will pick your partners, destroy your peace, and shape your legacy in his image. This is the war most men never name: the quiet civil war between the face they show the world and the boy they've never buried. But if you want to rise, if you want to stop bleeding in places no one can see, you must begin with one hard truth. You are not a man until you master your emotions. You've been lied to. You were told that if you're honest about your emotions, if you just speak your truth, the world will understand. That if you cry openly, shout passionately, feel deeply, people will respect you more. But let me be brutally clear, the world is not your therapist. It does not reward emotional exposure. It punishes it. And not because the world is cruel, but because it's efficient. Because in every game of life, emotion without control is a liability. Do you know who wins in politics, in business, in relationships? Not the loudest, not the kindest, not even the smartest. The ones who win are the ones who can read your emotions while hiding their own. They see your triggers like road signs. They watch you unravel when you're slighted, ignored, or disrespected. And while you're fuming, reacting, defending your ego, they're planning, maneuvering, setting the next trap. You think you're being real? No, you're being predictable. And in a world that trades on leverage, being predictable is being prey. That's why manipulators rise. They're not magical. They're just strategic. They know how to press the right buttons, pause at the right moments, and say exactly what you want to hear or exactly what you can't emotionally handle. And you thinking you're in control have already lost the game before the conversation even begins. You may think your outbursts give you power. That yelling, walking out, sending the angry text, or posting your feelings for everyone to see makes you bold. It doesn't. It makes you easy to read, easy to guide, easy to use. Because every time you explode, someone somewhere is quietly taking note of exactly how to control you next time. There is no prize for wearing your heart on your sleeve. No reward for telling the world how badly you've been hurt. The only thing it earns you is exposure, and those who are ruthless enough will weaponize it. Not because they're evil, but because that's how systems work. They favor the calm, the collected, the quietly ruthless. This is the part no one dares to say because it hurts, because it demands accountability. But the truth is this: if you cannot master your emotional landscape, the world will shape it for you, and it won't ask for permission. In life, you are either the strategist or the puppet, and every uncontrolled reaction pulls your strings a little tighter. You want it now. You want the results, the recognition, the relationship, the reward, and you want it fast. Waiting feels like dying. Silence feels like failure. And patience. That's for monks, not men like you, right? That's the lie. The one whispered to you from every screen, every dopamine-fueled scroll, every voice that told you if it doesn't happen quickly, it isn't meant to be. But let me tell you something. You won't hear in a world obsessed with speed, anything worth having takes longer than your ego is willing to wait for. And every time you choose instant gratification, you're trading your future for a momentary fix. Think about it. How many times have you ruined something good, not because it wasn't working, but because it didn't work fast enough? How many goals have you abandoned, not because they were impossible, but because they were uncomfortable? How many people have you pushed away because they didn't give you what you wanted on your timeline? You think you're driven, but you're just impatient. You call it standards, but it's really emotional urgency masked as ambition. The truth is, most of your decisions aren't strategic, they're desperate. And desperation is not power, it's the opposite. It's you controlled by an itch you never learned to tame. The man-child inside you demands pleasure now. He can't sit with discomfort. He confuses pain with danger and silence with rejection. So he grabs, reacts, escapes, rushes, and every time he does, you lose something important, a relationship that could have deepened a dream, that needed more time, a version of yourself that could have been unshakable. And the worst part, you've dressed it all up as being true to yourself. You've convinced yourself that spontaneity is strength, that walking away early is wisdom, that emotional urgency is passion. But let's be real, it's fear. Fear of the work, fear of the wait, fear of not being in control. But here's the truth, discipline is stronger than desire. And if you can learn to delay gratification, to sit with the urge without obeying it, you will unlock a level of power most men never reach. Because while they're busy chasing, you'll be building. And when they burn out, you'll still be standing. You don't need it now. You need it when it's ready, and when you are. You've been taught that passion is power, that expressing yourself, speaking your truth, and leading from the heart is strength. But let me say it plainly, power has nothing to do with how you feel and everything to do with how you think. Your emotions, if left unchecked, are not assets. They're vulnerabilities, and anyone with eyes sharp enough can use them against you. You cannot lead with emotion and expect stability. You cannot walk into a negotiation fueled by rage or love and expect to come out clean. Because feelings distort reality. They cloud judgment. They convince you that the immediate reaction is the correct one, that how you feel is more important than what the moment demands. But the truth is brutal. Your emotions don't care about outcomes. Strategy does. Machiavelli understood this. That's why he warned against ruling with the heart. The prince who lets his emotions rule is not a prince, he's a pawn, a puppet to his own impulses. You might think your fire makes you powerful, but real power isn't loud. It doesn't need to scream. Real power is cold, calculated, patient. It knows when to move, when to retreat, when to strike, and most importantly, when to wait. The world doesn't bend for the emotional, it bends for the strategic. And if you think being raw and real will win you battles, you haven't been in a real war. The battlefield of life rewards those who can feel without reacting, who can hurt without exposing weakness, who can face betrayal and still make moves like a man untouched. This doesn't mean you suppress everything. It means you channel everything. Your anger, use it as fuel. Your heartbreak, let it teach you patterns. Your frustration, let it refine your timing. But never, never let those emotions drive the car. Because if they do, you won't lead, you'll crash. And you'll blame the world while sitting in the wreckage you created with your own hands. Leadership isn't about being liked. It's not about being expressive. It's about being effective. And effectiveness demands emotional distance from the battlefield. So the next time you feel that fire rising, pause, step back. Think like a general, not a soldier. Because the one who governs himself, not his feelings, is the one who ends up governing the world. Look around. Open your phone, turn on your screen, walk into a room full of noise. What do you see? You see grown men throwing tantrums on live TV influencers, shouting into microphones, leaders acting on impulse, and being celebrated for it. You see men praised not for discipline but for drama, not for silence but for spectacle. We have entered an era where emotional immaturity isn't just tolerated, it's glorified. And it's a trap. Because the modern world, especially online, doesn't reward self-mastery, it rewards visibility. Loudness. Instant emotion. The man who screams, who reacts, who says the most outrageous thing in the most unfiltered way, he's the one who goes viral. He's the one who gets the applause. But here's the sinister truth. Those applause are the sound of chains being fastened. You think they're cheering for you, but they're not. They're conditioning you to believe that immaturity is bravery, that impulse is authenticity, that chaos is leadership. But real bravery, it's not loud, it's not desperate. It's the man who sits with his discomfort in silence, who watches his ego rise and doesn't obey it, who leads not to be seen, but to be effective. You see, society rewards the childlike because the childlike are easy to control. They're reactive, predictable, they crave attention, and a man who needs to be seen is a man who can be bought. So the system elevates them, shines. The spotlight gives them the stage only to break them when they have served their purpose. How many times have you seen it? A public figure rise fast adored for being raw, real, unfiltered, only to fall apart in a breakdown. Everyone watches with popcorn. That's not a hero's arc, that's exploitation. And the reason it keeps happening is because we've confused exposure with influence. But exposure without discipline is a public implosion waiting to happen. And if you're not careful, that same pattern will play out in your life. You'll start performing instead of building. You'll mistake attention for respect. And by the time you realize you were being used, it'll be too late. So ask yourself, are you living for the moment or building something that can survive the silence? Because when the spotlight fades, and it always does, only those who've matured in private will stand in power when the noise ends. You think you're free. You make your own choices, say what you want, live how you please. But let's dig deeper. Who are you when no one's watching? Who are you when no one claps? When no one validates your effort, affirms your worth, or echoes your opinion? Be honest, does your identity remain intact, or does it start to fall apart? Because here's the uncomfortable truth. As long as you rely on external approval to feel worthy, you are not free, you are owned. You don't need a prison cell to be a prisoner. Sometimes all it takes is applause. Sometimes all it takes is silence, the kind that drives you crazy because no one's reacting to you. And so without even realizing it, you begin to chase validation like a drug. A compliment becomes your fix. I like becomes your oxygen. And before long, your entire life becomes performance-based. You're not doing it for you anymore. You're doing it for the reaction. And that's the beginning of psychological slavery. Because now anyone who can reward you can control you. They don't need to threaten you. They just need to withhold praise, delay attention, or challenge your image. And you'll bend not because you're weak, but because you're emotionally dependent. The man-child thrives on attention. He needs to be seen, to be acknowledged, to be told he matters. And when he doesn't get that, he falls apart. He lashes out, he compromises, he performs. Not out of strength, but out of desperation, the desperation to be relevant. But real power, the kind that lasts, comes from emotional self-sufficiency, from knowing who you are even in silence, from building in the dark without the need to be congratulated. That's where freedom lives, not in being noticed, but in not needing to be. So ask yourself, what happens when the praise stops? When the audience leaves, will you still stand, or will you collapse because your self-worth was built on echoes? Break the addiction. Stop living to be validated. Start living to be grounded. Because the man who no longer needs permission to feel worthy is the man no one can manipulate, own, or break. That man, he doesn't just walk free, he leads. In a world obsessed with appearances, it's easy to forget there's supposed to be a person underneath the performance. Somewhere along the way, you stopped becoming and started curating. You crafted a version of yourself you thought others would respect. The confident man, the driven one, the guy who always has an opinion, always knows what to say, always looks like he's in control. But here's the truth: if the person you show to the world is stronger than the person you are when you're alone, you're living on borrowed time. Image is powerful. Machiavelli knew that. He didn't reject appearance, he warned against becoming its slave. Because when your identity fuses with your image, you lose the ability to separate what's real from what's necessary. You stop being honest with yourself. You stop making decisions based on values and start making them based on optics. What will people think? How will this look? Will it hurt the brand? Will I still be respected? You may be admired, you may be followed, you may even be feared, but inside you're hollow. You've built a stage and forgotten to build a foundation. And the worst part, you can feel it. You can feel the pressure of maintaining it all, the constant need to be on, to say the right thing, to look unshakable even when you're falling apart. You can't afford to be vulnerable because you've made strength your brand. You can't afford to doubt yourself because you've made certainty your identity. So you keep performing until the mask grows heavier than your real face. Eventually it cracks. They always do. And when it does, people won't know who you are. Because you won't either. This is the danger of living in a world that rewards the image more than the individual. You begin to confuse visibility with value. But value isn't in how many eyes are on you. It's in whether you can stand when no one's looking, whether your decisions hold when there's no applause, whether your purpose outlives the character you created to impress the world. Don't become the mask. Don't sacrifice your soul to protect your persona. Because the higher you build your image without substance, the louder the collapse will echo when it all comes crashing down. Remember, image might earn attention, but only substance earns respect. You might think your emotional immaturity is personal, that it only affects you, that your outbursts, your impulsive decisions, your need for control, for recognition, for being right, are things you deal with privately, quietly. But the truth is far darker than that. Immaturity doesn't stay contained. It spreads. Like smoke in a sealed room, it fills every corner of your environment. And before long, the people around you start choking on something they didn't even ignite. You see, when a man lacks inner discipline, he leaks chaos. Not just into his relationships, but into his team, his business, his family, his legacy. His reactions become the emotional weather of the room. His silence becomes tension. His moods dictate movement. And everyone around him, whether they admit it or not, begins to adjust their behavior based on his instability. The worst part: the man-child believes he's being authentic. He says, "I'm just expressing myself." But expression without responsibility is not authenticity, it's immaturity. And immaturity, when it occupies a position of power, creates destruction at scale. How many families have been damaged because one man couldn't sit with his emotions? How many teams have collapsed because a leader couldn't handle criticism? How many relationships have ended not because of a lack of love, but because one person kept acting like a wounded child demanding to be understood, instead of a stable adult choosing to understand people follow your example more than your words? And if what they're following is a person constantly justifying poor emotional behavior, then what you're creating is not leadership, it's dysfunction disguised as freedom. You're not leading people into clarity, you're pulling them into your chaos. And chaos is contagious. You may think you're the center of your story, but in reality, you're a gravitational force. Your maturity or lack of it determines the emotional rhythm of everyone in your orbit. Whether you like it or not, you are shaping others by how you handle yourself. And every time you lose it, every time you react, every time you retreat instead of respond, you teach the people around you that this is what a man looks like. And they start to mirror it. So if you can't master yourself, for you do it for them, for the people who trust you, for the ones you influence even when you're unaware of it. Because your weakness doesn't end with you. It becomes the template for someone else's life. You think maturity arrives like a badge, that one day after enough pain, enough experience, enough chaos, you'll just wake up wiser. But it doesn't work like that. Real maturity doesn't shout. It doesn't announce itself with fanfare. It doesn't come with a trophy, a promotion, or applause. It begins in silence. It begins in that quiet, uncomfortable space where no one's watching, where there's no one to blame, and nowhere left to run. It begins the moment you stop looking for someone else to fix what you broke, to heal what you neglected, or to explain why your life keeps repeating itself. That moment when you finally accept that no one is coming to save you, that's when the boy starts to die, and the man begins to rise. Maturity isn't about being serious or emotionless. It's about ownership, about knowing that your reactions are your responsibility even when you're triggered. It's about holding yourself accountable even when no one else does. It's about doing the right thing, not for validation, not for recognition, but because it aligns with who you've decided to become. You won't be celebrated for this. No one applauds when you choose not to argue. No one throws a party when you stay calm instead of exploding. The world doesn't notice the battles you win internally, but those victories, they are the foundation of everything powerful and lasting in your life. Because when you take full responsibility for yourself, something changes. You stop blaming your past. You stop needing constant support. You stop making excuses. And in that shift, you become someone people can trust, not because you're perfect, but because you're steady. And let's be clear, this isn't easy. There will be days when silence feels unbearable, when your pride screams to be defended, when your ego demands attention, but you'll learn to let it scream and not obey, because now you're not a slave to your impulses. You're the architect of your response. This is where real power lives, not in domination over others, but in mastery over yourself. Not in performance, but in quiet, relentless alignment. Maturity is not something you claim. It's something you prove moment by moment in how you respond to pressure, pain, and provocation. And that kind of maturity, it doesn't need to be seen. It speaks through presence, through poise, through patience. Because the most powerful men don't raise their voices, they raise their standards. You've been conditioned to believe that power must be seen to be real, that it's about volume, presence, dominance, that the strongest man in the room is the loudest, the most visible, the most celebrated. But that's a lie designed to distract you from a far more dangerous truth. Real power doesn't seek attention, it operates in silence, invisible discipline. That's the trait no one sees but everyone feels. It's the quiet decision to hold your tongue when your ego wants to explode. It's walking away not out of weakness, but because engaging would cost you focus. It's the thousands of moments where you could have reacted and didn't. Not because you were afraid, but because you were in control. That's what separates men who build legacies from boys who chase moments. The boy wants to be noticed. He needs to prove himself. He shows every win posts, every step documents, every battle. But the man, he builds in the shadows. He delays gratification. He works when no one is watching and doesn't need validation to stay consistent. The most dangerous man is not the one who reacts. It's the one who observes. The one you underestimate because he says little but sees everything. His discipline is so embedded in him it doesn't need to be performed. It's reflex, it's rhythm, and it's unshakable. That kind of power doesn't come from being admired. It comes from being grounded, from having internal order while the world outside falls apart, from being the eye of the storm, not the chaos inside it. And yes, it's hard, because no one claps for what they can't see. No one praises the battles you win in silence. No one celebrates the restraint that stops you from burning bridges. But those invisible victories, they build the life everyone else envies. Discipline is not sexy. It's not viral. It doesn't go trending, but it builds something so rare: inner sovereignty. The kind of strength that doesn't need to explain itself. The kind of presence that earns respect before you speak. The kind of command that can't be taken because it wasn't given by anyone but you. So no, real power isn't loud. It isn't flashy. It isn't even obvious. It's what you do when no one's looking, and how you carry yourself when everyone is. Most men carry a secret they never speak of. A quiet fear buried beneath bravado, strategy, and ambition, that deep down they're still ruled by a boy. Not the innocent kind, but the impulsive, wounded, emotionally fragile child who never learned how to let go of control without screaming. And here's the truth few have the courage to admit: If you don't kill that boy, he will kill you. He won't use a weapon. He won't strike you down in a dramatic moment. No, he'll destroy you slowly, through careless decisions, through repeated patterns, through the relationships you keep wrecking, the opportunities you keep wasting, and the self-respect you quietly bleed out every time you react instead of respond. You've already felt it. Every time you say something in anger and regret it the moment it leaves your mouth. Every time you sabotage something meaningful because you couldn't handle the weight, the silence, or the discomfort. That's not fate. That's not personality. That's the boy inside you making adult decisions. And he is dangerous because unlike you, he doesn't care about consequences. He wants comfort. He wants control. He wants everything now. And he will burn your future just to avoid a moment of emotional tension. He doesn't build, he breaks. He doesn't listen, he demands. He doesn't evolve. He clings to identity, to wounds, to stories that no longer serve you and the world. It doesn't forgive that kind of immaturity. It uses it. Then it discards you when you no longer entertain. You think people will understand your pain, justify your temper, excuse your lack of growth. They won't. All they'll see is a man who never matured, a man they can't trust, can't follow, and ultimately can't respect. But it doesn't have to end that way. The inner child doesn't need to be hated. He needs to be laid to rest, with honor, with clarity, with discipline. Not in a moment of rage, but in a decision: you no longer get to run my life. Kill the boy not with cruelty, but with structure, with vision, with a standard so high that emotional chaos can't reach it. That is how a man is born, not by growing older, but by making the choice: I will no longer die by my own hand. Because if you don't end the rule of the child will end the man you were meant to become. You're waiting. Whether you admit it or not, some part of you is still waiting. Waiting for someone to step in. Waiting for life to get easier. Waiting for a mentor, a woman, a moment, a breakdown, something that will finally force you to grow up. But here's the brutal truth: no one is coming. No one will mature you. No one will drag you out of your emotional immaturity and make you whole. Because this battle, it's yours, and it's fought in silence. You'll face it not when the lights are on, but when you're alone with your thoughts. When you're tempted to react instead of reflect. When your pride rises and you choose silence. When your comfort screams and you choose discomfort. That's where the real work happens, not in public, but in the dark corners of your life, where no one gives you credit and no one is keeping score. There is no mentor who can do it for you. No woman who can love you into discipline. No success that will magically unlock emotional control. Maturity isn't a reward, it's a decision. And that decision will cost you the things you've used to avoid yourself, the drama, the noise, the self-pity, the identity built on wounds instead of standards. Most men never fight this battle. They grow older, not deeper. They build careers, but never character. They chase love, but never develop self-respect. They get louder, but never clearer. Because clarity only comes when you stop outsourcing your becoming. When you look in the mirror and finally say, "This is on me, all of it," that's the moment the excuses die. That's when growth begins. And it's lonely. No one tells you that part. Maturing is not glamorous. It doesn't get you likes. It doesn't earn applause. It means saying no when you want to say yes. It means walking away from comfort, from validation, from chaos that once felt like home. It means choosing purpose over pleasure again and again without expecting anyone to notice. But if you can hold that line, if you can stay in the tension without numbing it, if you can make the hard decision in silence and carry it without recognition, then you win something most men will never touch: self-ownership. And with that comes a new kind of freedom. Not freedom from the world, but freedom from yourself. The version of you that waited, that blamed, that needed. That man dies. And in his place stands someone no one can control, no one can shake, and no one can stop. Final life lesson: the power to lead begins within. In a world that glorifies noise, speed, and emotional reactivity, the most radical thing you can do is slow down, look inward, and take ownership of your life. The core truth is this: no one is responsible for your growth but you. Not your parents, not your partner, not society. If you're waiting for someone to give you permission to change, you'll wait forever. Maturity is a choice, not a phase of life. And it doesn't happen in public. It happens in private, in the moments where no one is clapping and you choose discipline over impulse. When you decide to build instead of react, to walk away instead of explode, to stay steady when everything in you wants to collapse. Real freedom isn't doing whatever you want. It's having the strength to do what's right even when it's hard, even when it's invisible. That's where leadership begins. Not with charisma, not with being liked, but with self-command, with inner structure, with the death of the emotional child who once needed to be validated in every room. So if you're tired of the same patterns, the same chaos, the same regrets, look inward. Own your reactions, train your emotions, build your identity on character, not applause. And understand this, your legacy will not be built by what you felt, but by what you mastered. This isn't just advice, it's the beginning of your freedom.